Justine Abshire, the beloved elementary school teacher with a radiant smile, and Ryan Abshire, her seemingly devoted husband, were the picture-perfect couple until a cold November morning shattered their facade. When Justine's lifeless body was discovered on a lonely stretch of road, the small town of Willow Creek was thrown into chaos, uncovering secrets of betrayal, obsession, and a deadly encounter that no one saw coming. Willow Creek, Virginia, was a place where life moved at a gentle pace. Nestled among rolling hills and dotted with picturesque farms, it was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were hard to keep. Justine Abshire was a cherished member of this close-knit community. A bright, compassionate elementary school teacher, she was adored by her students and respected by her peers. To those who knew her, Justine seemed to lead a storybook life. Married to Ryan Abshire, a hardworking local mechanic, she embodied kindness and dedication, not only to her career, but also to her family and friends. All of that changed on a cold November morning in 2017. The news spread quickly through town. Justine's lifeless body had been discovered on a desolate stretch of Route 9, just outside the town limits. The initial report described the scene as a tragic hit and run. Her crumpled form was found by a passing driver who immediately called the police. The sight was harrowing. Justine, still wearing her coat, lay face down on the pavement, illuminated by the faint glow of dawn. The discovery shocked the community. People whispered about how someone could have been so callous as to strike her with a vehicle and leave her there, alone in the cold. The stretch of road where she was found was particularly dark and remote, and flanked by dense trees and with no streetlights to guide drivers. But the mystery deepened when investigators noticed that Justine's car was found miles away, parked on the shoulder of another road. The vehicle appeared intact with no sign of a mechanical failure. Her purse was inside, untouched, further complicating the narrative. What was she doing on foot so far from her car? And why would she have been walking along such an isolated route in the dead of night? Questions began to ripple through Willow Creek. Those closest to Justine insisted that the situation didn't make sense. Her family described her as cautious and unlikely to walk alone at night, especially in such a secluded area. Friends and coworkers echoed these sentiments, painting a picture of a woman who valued safety and routine. The community, though tight-knit, quickly became a boiling pot of speculation. Some pointed to the possibility of an accident. Others whispered about something darker, a shadowy undercurrent of foul play. The initial police investigation sought to determine how Justine had ended up on that road. Officers canvassed the area, speaking with anyone who might have seen or heard something. Yet, no one could provide answers. There were no reports of a vehicle speeding away, no witnesses to any altercation, and no security cameras in the vicinity. The road itself offered little in the way of clues, save for faint tire marks near where her body was found. As more details emerged, the town's idyllic facade began to crumble. Justine Abshire, the radiant teacher with an unshakable smile, was no longer just a victim of a tragic accident. The circumstances surrounding her death hinted at something far more sinister, a puzzle that investigators were determined to solve. The shock of her loss reverberated through the community, leaving everyone to wonder who or what was responsible for taking her life. As investigators began to peel back the layers of Justine Abshire's life, unsettling details emerged that transformed her death from a tragic accident into a chilling mystery. The initial autopsy results revealed that her injuries were not entirely consistent with a hit and run. While she bore the expected trauma from being struck by a vehicle, there were other injuries that couldn't be explained by the impact alone. Blunt force trauma to her skull suggested she might have been struck with a heavy object before her death. Adding to the grim picture were defensive wounds on her hands, indicating she had tried to shield herself from an attacker. This discovery sent shockwaves through Willow Creek. The idea that someone might have intentionally harmed Justine was unthinkable to those who knew her. Police now had to consider the possibility that her death had been staged to look like an accident. The case grew more complicated as investigators turned their focus to her personal life, particularly her relationship with her husband, Ryan Abshire. Ryan's behavior in the wake of Justine's death was puzzling to those who observed him. While grief affects people in different ways, his demeanor struck many as unusual. During his initial interviews with police, Ryan described an argument he had with Justine on the night of her death. According to him, the fight had been over a trivial matter, but it escalated, and she stormed out of the house. Ryan claimed he begged her to stay, but she ignored him and left on foot. He insisted he had no idea where she had gone and that he spent the rest of the night at home, distraught and waiting for her to return. Despite his apparent cooperation, there were inconsistencies in Ryan's story that raised eyebrows. He seemed unsure of the exact timeline of events and changed minor details about the argument each time he recounted it. Friends and neighbors later reported that while Ryan appeared devastated in public, they had seen no signs of emotional distress when they visited him at home. He was described as calm, almost detached, which struck some as odd given the circumstances. The investigation took a shocking turn when police discovered Justine's personal journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the couple's bedroom. The journal entries painted a starkly different picture of her marriage. While the community had seen them as a loving couple, Justine described feeling increasingly isolated and afraid. She wrote about Ryan's temper and controlling behavior, recounting incidents where he belittled her or became irrationally jealous. One particularly chilling entry described her fear that he might hurt her one day. This revelation shifted the focus of the investigation. Could Ryan have been involved in his wife's death? If so, had their argument escalated to violence, leading him to cover his tracks by staging her death as a hit and run? While police considered Ryan a person of interest, they couldn't ignore other possibilities. Was it possible someone else had taken advantage of the couple's conflict to harm Justine? As rumors about the journal began to circulate, Willow Creek's image as a quiet, peaceful town was shattered. The community began to question everything they thought they knew about Justine's life and the people around her. Investigators were left with more questions than answers as they tried to piece together the final moments of her life. What had started as a tragic accident was quickly becoming a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and hidden truths. As investigators dug deeper into Justine Abshire's life, another name surfaced: Mark Elliott. Mark was a fellow teacher at Willow Creek Elementary, known for his easygoing nature and strong rapport with students. His relationship with Justine had initially appeared professional, but as police delved into their connection, they found clues suggesting it might have been more than that. Mark's involvement, or at least his proximity to Justine's life, introduced another layer of complexity to an already convoluted case. Phone records revealed an ongoing series of late-night calls and text messages between Justine and Mark in the weeks leading up to her death. While the content of the messages was not overtly romantic, their frequency and timing raised suspicions. Many were sent during hours when most people would be asleep, and their tone hinted at a closeness that went beyond workplace camaraderie. This revelation cast doubt on the stability of Justine's marriage and raised questions about whether Mark and Justine had been involved in an affair. Colleagues from the school described Justine and Mark as close friends, but denied noticing anything inappropriate between them. Still, some admitted they had seen them share moments that seemed unusually personal. Quiet conversations during lunch breaks, lingering glances in the hallways. Mark, when questioned by police, vehemently denied any romantic relationship, insisting they were simply confidants. He claimed Justine had confided in him about her marital troubles, and he had offered her support as a friend. Mark's denials didn't stop the growing whispers around town. In a community as small as Willow Creek, rumors spread like wildfire. People speculated about what role Mark might have played in Justine's final days. Was he a supportive friend caught in a tragic situation? Or was he somehow connected to her death? The police weren't convinced either way, and continued to scrutinize his actions and whereabouts on the night of the incident. When asked about his alibi, Mark claimed he had been home alone grading papers. This explanation, while plausible, was unsubstantiated. He had no witnesses to verify his claim, and no phone activity or other evidence placed him elsewhere. The lack of a concrete alibi didn't make him guilty, but it added another layer of suspicion. As the investigation into Mark continued, the discovery of Justine's journal added fuel to the fire. One entry mentioned her growing reliance on a friend who understood her struggles and offered her an escape from the tension at home. While she didn't name Mark explicitly, the description fit him perfectly. To the police, this suggested a deeper bond between the two than either had admitted. The possibility of a love triangle emerged as a working theory. If Ryan had discovered Justine's relationship with Mark, it could have been the catalyst for the argument they had on the night of her death. But could Mark himself have been involved? Did his feelings for Justine lead to jealousy, rage, or a confrontation that spiraled out of control? The unraveling of these connections left investigators with more questions than answers. Ryan remained a person of interest, but Mark was now firmly on their radar as well. With two potential suspects, each with motives rooted in love, betrayal, and secrecy, the case grew darker. The pieces of the puzzle didn't yet fit together, but the shadows around Justine's life became harder to ignore. Weeks after Justine Abshire's tragic death, the investigation seemed to stall. Leads were pursued, suspects were questioned, and rumors circulated endlessly, but no concrete evidence pointed to a clear perpetrator. That all changed when a local farmer made a chilling discovery. While clearing debris from a ditch less than a mile from where Justine's body was found, he stumbled upon a blood-stained tire iron partially hidden beneath a layer of fallen leaves. Realizing the potential significance of the object, he immediately contacted the authorities. Forensic analysis confirmed what investigators had feared. The tire iron was the weapon used to inflict the blunt force trauma to Justine's head. Blood traces matched her DNA, but there was more. A second DNA profile was recovered from the handle, belonging to an unknown individual. This discovery confirmed that her death was no accident. It was a deliberate act of violence. The tire iron reignited public interest in the case and brought renewed focus to the suspects. Investigators turned their attention back to Ryan Abshire and Mark Elliott, both of whom had been under scrutiny since the early days of the investigation. Ryan's explanations of his movements on the night of Justine's death had already been inconsistent, and this new evidence put even more pressure on him to account for his actions. Detectives revisited surveillance footage from gas stations and businesses in the area, hoping to place Ryan near the scene. To their surprise, a security camera at a nearby gas station captured him filling up his truck just minutes before the estimated time of Justine's death. This footage conflicted with his claim that he had spent the entire night at home after their argument. Confronted with the evidence, Ryan changed his story. He admitted to driving around after their fight, but insisted he had done so out of worry for Justine's safety. He claimed he had been searching for her, not fleeing from anything. While Ryan's revised account raised eyebrows, investigators couldn't ignore another possibility. The DNA on the tire iron didn't belong to him or to Mark Elliott. This development complicated the case further. Could a third party have been involved in Justine's death? If so, how did they fit into the narrative of her troubled marriage and possible affair? The search for the unknown DNA match led police to comb through databases of prior offenders and run extensive background checks on anyone who had been in the Willow Creek area around the time of the murder. After weeks of painstaking work, they found a match. Caleb Monroe, a drifter with a long history of violent behavior. Caleb had no known connection to Justine, Ryan, or Mark, but he had been passing through the area when the crime occurred. When police tracked Caleb down, he was living in a rundown motel in a neighboring county. They brought him in for questioning, and while he initially denied any involvement, cracks began to show in his story. His criminal record included assault and theft, but nothing that suggested he was capable of the brutality displayed in Justine's case. Nevertheless, the DNA evidence was undeniable, and investigators were determined to uncover the truth about his role in her death. The discovery of the tire iron and the introduction of Caleb Monroe into the investigation turned the case on its head. What had once seemed like a crime of passion or domestic violence now hinted at something more chaotic and random. But even as detectives closed in on Caleb, they couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to the story. The threads of the case, Ryan's lies, Mark's closeness to Justine, and now Caleb's sudden appearance, refused to weave into a coherent picture. Willow Creek was left waiting once again, hoping for answers that seemed increasingly elusive. The arrest of Caleb Monroe brought a jarring shift in the investigation into Justine Abshire's death. Caleb, a drifter with a criminal past, had no known ties to Justine, her husband Ryan, or her coworker Mark. Yet, the DNA evidence on the tire iron placed him at the center of the case. His denial of involvement cracked under pressure during hours of police interrogation, eventually leading to a chilling confession. Caleb claimed he encountered Justine walking along the dark road on the night of her death. He said he stopped to offer her a ride, but she refused. According to him, her rejection escalated into a heated argument, fueled by his frustration and temper. The situation spiraled out of control when Caleb struck her with the tire iron he carried in his truck, a weapon he claimed to keep for self-defense. He admitted to hitting her, but insisted that he didn't mean to kill her. Caleb's story didn't end there. He stated that after the initial attack, Justine was left lying injured on the road. He claimed he panicked, fled the scene, and later disposed of the tire iron in the ditch where it was eventually found. But in a twist that confounded investigators, Caleb insisted he wasn't responsible for her death. He alleged that a second car had come down the road after he had left, hitting her and ultimately causing her fatal injuries. This new version of events raised as many questions as it answered. Caleb's confession accounted for the blunt force trauma and his DNA on the weapon. But his claim about the hit and run introduced the possibility of another party being involved. Detectives struggled to verify his story. The tire marks found at the scene were too faint to conclusively identify a second vehicle, and no witnesses had come forward to support Caleb's account. Despite Caleb's confession, doubts lingered. Some investigators felt his version of events was too convenient, designed to shift full responsibility for Justine's death onto an unknown driver. Others believed that while Caleb was directly involved, the circumstances leading up to the crime didn't fit the narrative of a random encounter. Was it possible that someone else, like Ryan or Mark, had played a role in placing Justine on that road, making her vulnerable to Caleb's attack? Ryan and Mark were eventually cleared of any direct involvement in Justine's murder, but the cloud of suspicion around them never fully lifted. Ryan's changing story and the revelations in Justine's journal painted a picture of a troubled marriage, while Mark's closeness to Justine continued to fuel speculation about the true nature of their relationship. Though neither man faced charges, their lives were permanently altered by the investigation. Caleb Monroe was ultimately convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The court rejected his claims of an accidental hit and run, concluding that his violent actions directly led to Justine's death. For many in Willow Creek, his conviction brought some measure of closure, but questions about the events leading up to that night persisted. Justine's death left a void in the small community, a loss that was deeply felt by her students, colleagues, and friends. Her story became a cautionary tale about the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly peaceful lives. As the years passed, the case of Justine Abshire remained a topic of quiet conversation, a haunting reminder that even the most idyllic towns can harbor secrets, and that not every mystery is fully solved.